Hey everybody, and welcome to Cinema Gulp today. This is Ben.
And this is John.
And today we're going to be doing our summer movie wrap-up. So the summer of 2016 is officially over with, I guess, our last movie this summer being Don't Breathe.
Yeah, I think this is the traditional end of the summer anyway. I don't think Labor Day, it's usually considered a dumping ground. They don't put out anything that anyone really cares to see. It's actually a time that I think a lot of people are supposed to catch up on with whatever they missed during the summer that was a hit or whatever.
This is where you go to that dollar theater.
Yeah.
And catch all those ones that came out in July.
This summer was kind of eventful. I think there was a lot of films that wanted to do a lot better than they did.
Yeah, I'm very confused about this summer because on one side there's movies that made much more money than expected, and then there's other films that didn't do so well. So what were some of the bigger, now that summer's over, trend-wise, what was happening this summer? What patterns did you see happening from May all the way to the end of August?
Well, I think I want to just put out there what I think a typical summer movie should be, or what we expect from the summer period of movies. You know, usually we're expecting spectacle, big budget action films, lots of sequels. It's to be expected at this point. And, you know, they populated the summer with the usual, but there was a lot of little gems in there too. But yeah, I really want from the summer movies what they usually are trying to sell. These big popcorn films with a lot of effects. And usually I'm hoping for something that's pretty interesting and inventive, but we know it's always kind of recycled trash a lot.
Everything that I want out of a summer movie happened in 1996. I want Twister. 3 weeks later, I want Independence Day. 3 weeks later, I want Dragonheart. Yeah. To me, that sums up three very different types of summer movies. I guess two of them technically are sort of disaster movies, but very different from one another.
Yeah, and then on the comedy side, you know, we all are looking for these big spectacle movies to come out during the summer, but then there's always like comedies as well that are usually these big star-driven comedies or high-concept comedies, and I don't know that we got many of those this summer, but yeah, that's usually what I'm looking for in the summer period of movies.
We got a couple of female-driven comedies where we had Ghostbusters, and then we had the much more successful based on ratio, Bad Moms. But yeah, R-rated comedies generally have been doing better from, I want to say, around the Wedding Crashers day, about 11 years ago now, all the way up until when those Hangover movies started coming out. They really kind of set that new thing where you can make $100 million from having that limited audience of an R-rated film if you're good enough and word of mouth spreads, and you got to have that star power too. You know?
Well, even last summer, I mean, there was stuff like Spy, which was an R-rated comedy, and Trainwreck, which was an R-rated female-driven comedy. I mean, that's the trend. That's really the trend right now, is to have these R-rated female-driven comedies, and a lot of them are hits. A lot of them work. Yeah. I don't love all of them, but they seem to make money. They have their target audience, and like you said, Bad Moms is really hitting that female target audience, and it's doing well for them at the box office.
Yeah, and I saw it. It's very funny. But then you have films like, and this may go over into the sequel category, but who really cares if this is a sequel to anything? Neighbors 2. And then you have, what was it, like Jack and Rod Go to Night School or whatever the hell that movie was called?
Yeah, but it was an attempt, yeah.
Mike and Dave throw a party.
Wedding dates or whatever.
Something. But those two, both starring Zac Efron. Maybe he's just like Summer Poison. I don't know.
Didn't even think of that, yeah.
But neither of those did shit at the box office. Yeah. I think Neighbors was supposed to do a lot and just completely bombed. But the other one, I don't think anybody really gave a shit what it was in the first place. No. But then you have, which we'll get into a bunch, The Nice Guys, another R-rated comedy.
Yeah, I wanted to
bombing.
Point that out.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, yeah, I was just going to point that out. If we're talking R-rated comedies, that one does fall in that category. It's not the typical raunchy R-rated comedy trying to get the teen crowd.
It's much better than that.
It's much more sophisticated film, but it still has its raunchy, wild, outrageous side that works for an R-rated comedy. I wanted to find out, what was your most anticipated film of the summer?
Definitely for me, my most anticipated movie this summer going in was X-Men Apocalypse, hands down. I didn't even care about the reviews. To me, that movie was review proof. It just looked awesome, and coming off of Days of Future Past. Come on.
That's true. Coming off of Days of Future Past, I was pretty high on that film too. Looking forward to it. We'll talk about what we thought about it in a second. My most anticipated film of the summer would be Suicide Squad. I was hoping DC would really turn things around from how that Batman, Superman, and even the film before it had turned out. I like what Marvel has been able to do to build this universe. It's very exciting, and I'm fine with DC being able to do the same thing. So I was pretty excited. And also, again, I think a lot of what gets us excited about these films is the director behind them. I'm sure coming off of Days of Future Past and knowing that Bryan Singer was coming back
Yeah.
had you pretty excited for X-Men.
Absolutely.
And for me, Suicide Squad, knowing what David Ayers did with Fury, I was really excited to see him in this comic book mold too, and see how that turned out.
I think everyone was. I think that was the best directing decision DC had made so far, and you can tell that because there's lots of threads of his style in there, but you can tell that this thing, what went through with the process and the grinder that this thing went through.
For some reason, DC wants to put all their movies through that same meat grinder, and it doesn't turn out well. So next question I wanted to hit you up with really quick is, how many films this summer did you see?
I actually saw 24 films in the theater over the summer. I did not review all of them. But
what were some of the ones that you saw but didn't get a chance to review?
Okay, so I said Bad Moms. I didn't get around to reviewing it. I really wish that we could have done one because I think didn't need our help, though it did well. I went and saw Lights Out, and I just couldn't figure out what to say about it. It was just and I saw Swiss Army Man, which I know that you saw as well, and you did a fantastic review, quick shot review for. I saw Warcraft, as did you. We both saw this movie. We both did a podcast for it with some experts in Warcraft, but it just did not work out.
And we're sorry that review never hit the YouTube airwaves, but audio issues made it unlistenable. But yeah, we did see the film, just didn't get a chance to review.
And then something that I would have loved to review, not that I loved the movie, because I didn't, but was The Lobster. Yeah, bizarre, to say the least.
Yeah. I actually heard something about that director getting, the casting news for his next film, and it's like, God, why are these great actors working with what seems like a terrible director? But to be honest, I haven't seen either of his films. I just heard so much about them.
So what about you? Ones that you saw this summer but didn't get a chance?
So I saw 22 films this summer, which I feel is a very low number for me. Usually during the summer, I'm seeing everything, 2 or 3 movies a week, but a lot of things kind of got in the way at some point this summer and didn't see as many. So I'll catch up with a lot. But I saw 22 films that I saw that we didn't get a chance to review, or I didn't get a chance to review, would be Angry Birds. Just completely forgettable. Better as a video game on your phone. Now You See Me 2.
Oof.
Which I enjoyed the first film, but it's a very convoluted film. The second one just takes that to the 10th degree. It's just so unbelievable, the things that are going on in this film, that you're supposed to accept and imagine.
Too, right?
I
think it tanked.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to spawn like another sequel.
The marketing ploy of getting the boy wizard Harry Potter in a magic movie didn't seem to pay off.
Yeah, no. Warcraft, which we both just talked about, we did a review, but we weren't able to put that out. Conjuring 2, which you did an excellent review, so I felt I had no need to weigh in on that because I think what you said was exactly how I felt. We both really enjoyed that movie. Legend of Tarzan, another film that you did a review. I actually got around to seeing it after your review, and I enjoyed it. It was entertaining. And then the one that I wish I had done a review the most that I didn't get a chance to yet is Florence Foster Jenkins. I really enjoyed that movie as well. Definitely a sleeper hit for myself of the summer to some degree. But it's got a pedigree that I expected it to be pretty good with the actors and the director that's involved.
Okay, so while we're on the subject of marketing and how it affected things this summer, let's talk about what did well, what didn't do well, and why.
Certainly. Well, I think one of your most anticipated films of the summer, X-Men, was definitely affected by reviews, I would say. I don't really watch a lot of the marketing that comes out on films beforehand. I think we've stated before, I try to avoid previews as much as possible. So I don't know how psyched people were by the trailers of that film. I think I kind of heard internet buzz that people didn't think the early trailers were all that great. And that can affect the film. If you've got like a teaser that comes out a year before the film, like a Cloverfield or whatever, that just really sucks people in and they're so ready for your release date, it doesn't matter if you have somewhat bad trailers later. But if you have a bad original trailer teaser, it may not matter that you have a good trailer later on. People are already kind of like, that film's not going to be that good.
Well, things are different these days because you're referring to trailers and that's part of marketing, but everything is so different now. Initially, the first run of X-Men, the first few films marketed themselves amazing. The trailers were good. Internet was still growing. It was new. This last trilogy with First Class, with Days of Future Past, and with this newest one, Apocalypse, they were marketed poorly, especially First Class. Everything looked terrible. All the images that were coming out online look laughable, and like all the young New Mutants they were putting out, people were like, why are they putting those crappy mutants in, nobody cares. Days of Future Past had a terrible teaser using some music from Inception, and it just didn't work, and it was kind of laughed at. And then they didn't show a lot of footage because Bryan Singer withheld it. Then this one, again, they kept changing the color scheme of Apocalypse the villain himself and making him look stupid in one trailer and then different in another. And I think, like, yes, you have trailers and those things affect a lot of stuff, but you also have clips and images that show up on set and stuff like that, and people take those things seriously. And then when they start reading, because X-Men should be review proof, there should have a built-in fan base there, but bigger than marketing for X-Men, I think what hurt it was superhero fatigue, because you had March with Batman Superman, then the same month as X-Men, right before it, you had the biggest money-making superhero movie of the year, which was Civil War. I think it really hurt coming 2 weeks after that movie. I think if it came out in July, it may have done a little bit more business.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe it should have taken the weekend that Ghostbusters had or something, like separate itself. Because that's actually the weekend that I think Ant-Man came out, so it's kind of like a good weekend for superhero films to be released.
Like 15 mid-July.
Yeah, but they were probably looking at that would be right between Star Trek and Bourne. They didn't want to be an action film plopped right there.
The X-Men movies traditionally come out of Memorial Day weekend. 4 out of the 6 main ones have come out on Memorial Day weekend, so it was kind of a given that time slot was probably set in motion before they even knew there was a Civil War.
They definitely do that. They want to, if they've had success on that weekend before, they're going to go for it again.
So I think that's why that one failed. I mean, and it did fail significantly in the States. It did okay overseas.
We should maybe mention that the reviews that came out when it finally was released, it seemed like there was a lot of harsh negative reviews that we didn't necessarily agree with. If you want to check out our actual review of the movie, you'll see really what we thought in detail, but we were both pretty high on this movie and enjoyed it and did not understand the negativity that was put out there.
Absolutely. And this is another one where the audience meters on all these sites, after people had seen it, not critics, were much more they're much more receptive to it. They liked it a lot more than critics did. So, but another one. What's some of the other ones? Star Trek. Stellar reviews.
So the kind of opposite. Star Trek did not deal with negative reviews in any way. It had very positive reviews. I think it's in the high 80s or something on Rotten Tomatoes.
It was 88, 89, something like that.
Still there.
Bad marketing, because it came out with a teaser trailer with a Beastie Boys song, director of Fast and Furious, and people were like, fuck this movie.
Mm-hmm. What were some other films you think were affected by their marketing or reviews?
Well, Warcraft was affected by many, many different things. First of all, it's not a good movie. That's first and foremost. But it was not advertised in the United States, and now we know why, because it broke every record known to mankind in China. So clearly it was being advertised there much more than it was here. But that movie was affected by so many different things, but marketing was definitely top of the list.
And I think another one you mentioned was Tarzan. You felt, again, another film, I didn't really watch trailers, so I don't know what people's thoughts were too much before the film. Maybe we throw in there the BFG, another film that seemed to be hurt by its marketing, and not so much reviews. I think both of those films had pretty good reviews once people got around to seeing them.
I don't know. I didn't follow BFG very well. I know that Tarzan, it was a little bit more people who liked it than disliked it. But I think the problem with that movie was just lack of star power. Like, you do have Margot Robbie, who's an up and coming, but she's
if
Jane.
They had come out after Suicide Squad, I bet they could have marketed her a little bit more. Maybe it would have been just that much more money. Mm-hmm. Really been kind of a hit. I seem to remember it actually had a pretty good opening weekend. It was like following something else that was making all the money and was still number one, but it came in number 2 at like 50-something million. That's pretty good. It
surprised people. Yeah, it surprised people because it had this huge budget, and people were like, "Oh, it's not going to do well," and then it was tracking to do terrible. And it blasted what it was tracking to do. So it ended up doing good, just not as good as I guess the studio did. But I think it's star power and story.
I really like those kind of films, those adventure films like Tarzan, Zorro, or whatever, those kind of swashbuckling kind of films or whatever. Or this one's more in the vein of a adventure, Indiana Jones or whatever.
Jungle
adventure type films, or whatever. Like anything like that, or even Warcraft. That's like a medieval times kind of fantasy film. I really look forward to those kind of films films coming out and being well done. So I'm glad that at least there was an attempt to make this, and I think it made all right money. So
it
at
did.
least,
and it was good. It deserved to make money. It was better than I thought it was going to be, for sure. I think what Warcraft was missing was Samuel L. Jackson.
I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
You can put him in Agatha Christie, and I'll see it.
So yeah, that's a film that probably could have done better from the studio's eyes. I think Suicide Squad maybe could have done better. It's actually pushing 300 right now, so it's hard to say that's not a success. But Independence Day obviously didn't make money back.
No, we got to hit that
one.
one. So Independence Day Returgence. Check out our review online. Short and sweet, because it's just not a good film. But that movie did poorly. The marketing for it was ridiculously over the top on purpose, right? And then the marketing was also, they put out these little campaign documentaries about like what the older cast was up to. I can't believe it made $100 million. I'm assuming that's out of sheer curiosity of just how bad it was.
What we thought, this isn't our personal opinion, but these are things that made a lot of money or seemed to do well with critics over the summer. We're going to stick with mainly some of the bigger films, I think, because there's some small films that did really well with critics, but I don't think we should mention them just yet. So Dory actually ended up being the biggest moneymaker, and that's to be expected. Pixar always
totally expected.
Makes a ton of money, the Disney label. And the film was all right.
You slap a talking fish over a Pixar label, and it's going to make $500 million.
And you can say the same about Captain America: Civil War. Slap the Marvel label on it. These are brands that people trust.
Well, this one's not the Marvel label. This is Captain America and Iron Man front and center.
Yeah.
Like you put the Marvel label on Ant-Man, it makes 150 or 200. That's good, but it's not getting 450.
True. Yeah. So, and I think this was the film that people, the superhero fatigue, this was the film people were still willing to accept and be excited for, even in the middle of this kind of fatigue moment.
Well, this one benefited from a horrible Batman versus Superman. If this one was shit, maybe X-Men would have done better. But we knew this one wasn't going to be shit.
Yeah.
I gotta say, a movie that did really well, that more than quadrupled its budget, or just about quadrupled it, was The Shallows. And I know that that's not a big budgeted movie or anything, and it kind of came and went really under the radar. Didn't open up in the top 2, I don't think, with the month it came out, but it came out in a dangerous month in June where you can just get wiped off the map, and it had some legs, it got good reviews, and it did well, so I was happy to see that because I enjoyed it.
A couple other films that I think made pretty good money for their budgets or for whatever they, actually 2 animated films that we can point out. Secret Life of Pets was a huge hit, but that can be expected based on the brand that they're coming off of, the Despicable Me studio that's behind that. They seem to be big money makers over the last few years.
I don't know if most parents, well, and obviously kids, know or give a shit about Illumination. I think they marketed that movie brilliantly, even though it was false advertisement that it really wasn't about pets sitting at home when their owners leave. They marketed it so fucking good that got everyone, pet lovers, kids, parents, everyone to go see that movie.
Definitely. And I think it had word of mouth helped it out. It's like, you and I saw it, and I told a few people that it was good. So I do think it's a film that even parents were able to walk out and tell other parents, hey, you want to take your kids to a movie? Check this one out. So that probably helped it out as well. And then Sausage Party was another one that I think it's making pretty good money at this point, and it's going to be considered a success. I don't know what the budget for that is, but it's definitely a major success based on the amount of money it's making for its budget.
It was a $30 million budget. It's already up to 80-something. Slam dunk.
Yeah. And then the last one I think I'll mention that was that we're seeing be a success right now is Don't Breathe. It's probably going to definitely win this weekend again. I think they're talking about it having a very small drop in percentage in terms of money for the weekend. So that one is going to be kind of a runaway success.
That too, yeah. And that reminds me, Lights Out, $5 million budget, closed out in the theater at $65 million. That's a slam fucking dunk.
Ones that we didn't see that studio certainly wanted to make more money on. Neighbors 2 was a failure. Alice Through the Looking Glass, a huge failure.
I forgot all about that movie.
Yeah, well, these are films we didn't see. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the sequel.
that was a bomb.
That was a big bomb for the studio.
And they were really putting all their cards in that, with putting on all those new villains and the fan favorites, and people just didn't bite.
The BFG didn't do much for whoever made that.
Well, I've never
Spielberg.
felt so much in sync with the rest of the world because I had zero interest in that movie. Just nothing.
Just the name Spielberg had me interested, but I just never got around to it. That brings up our next point, that typical summers are filled with sequels and reboots these days. And last summer, there were a lot that really worked and really generated excitement for these series at the time to spawn new sequels. They had Mad Max, Jurassic Park, Mission Impossible 5, Pitch Perfect 2, which was kind of terrible, but still made a ton of money, and everyone's excited for sequels to all of those films.
Last summer was the opposite of this summer when it came to that. Mad Max was a Best Picture nominee for an Oscar. Jurassic World became one of the most successful movies of all time. MI5 stayed status quo, made its $200 million. I don't know what the hell. I've never seen any Picture Perfect. I don't know what the fuck that is.
Yeah, but it made a ton of money, and it's spawning future sequels.
Okay.
But this summer's sequels, reboots are Independence Day 2, Bourne, Jason Bourne, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Ghostbusters may put that inevitable nail in the coffin of these like reboots that have nothing to do with the originals.
Alice in Wonderland, Ice Age, and then the one that we really have to lament is on this list would be Star Trek. It's making all right money, but they wanted to make more, and I'm hearing these grumblings of like, we've already announced a fourth film, and people like you and I are really excited to see them continue, but other people from a box office standpoint, or maybe the bean counters, are like, I don't know, that sounds like a risky proposition. You're the only reboot out there that's working, that picked a good cast and is 3 films in with good films that we're really interested in seeing, at least from a fan standpoint. So I hope they don't screw that one up by changing already.
It's still a lucrative franchise, and the studio knows it. What they're going to do moving forward is they're going to drop the budget. That's all they're going to do. They're going to find new ways, and maybe they move forward with Justin Lin, or maybe they find someone who can stretch a smaller budget, because when I heard the budget for this one, I'm like, it really wasn't necessary. You can make a good Star Trek movie with these characters and cut that budget by a third at least.
Especially if you focus on character, because they have great
Which this one
actors
did.
and great characters.
Yeah.
Keep it a character-driven story, cut out some of the flash and action, and you'll have a lower budget. But
just keep it out of space so much. That costs all the money.
And you might lose some of the summer action crowd. Maybe you release it in a little different time of year. Okay, so that covers what we saw happen, some of the trends this summer, what we thought did well and didn't do well, what we had our most anticipation for. Okay, so now we're going to go into more detail about what we really liked. So I want to start off by asking you, what was your 5th favorite film of the summer?
Okay, so for me, John, out of this summer of 2016, of all the films that we've been talking about, my 5th favorite film of this summer is The Conjuring 2. I love this movie. I thought it was scary. I thought the imagery was beautiful. I think James Wan is amazing. I hope he just keeps doing these kind of movies where they just give him carte blanche. He's becoming one of the best horror directors, in my opinion.
So my 5th favorite film of the summer, out of all the films we saw, Florence Foster Jenkins. A small film.
Ta-da!
Yeah, a small character-driven film. There's no special effects. There's no action scenes. There's no nudity. There's no violence. There's no nudity, but isn't Meryl Streep in it? There's no cursing that I'm aware of. It was just a great film. It was a feel-good movie. It was very funny. It was well-directed. Stephen Frears, who's always done these kind of, I don't know, I call them like grandma movies. I mean, there are a lot of films that center around females and stuff, but a lot of them also have a little bit of a comedic side to them.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I do think that maybe later in the year when we're talking about Oscars and things, that this film may come up again for at least Meryl Streep. I know she gets nominated every time she does a movie essentially, but this one is another kind of deserving performance. It's really great and very funny, and even Hugh Grant may be in the conversation.
I was going to say, the thing I'm most curious about this is I keep hearing how good he is. And I've always kind of been a fan of his anyway. I don't think he's as one note as people say, but was he...
Well, that's the thing. It's a little less one note than some of his more comedic and broad performances you've seen in the past. But I'm not like sold on he's a shoe-in for any kind of Oscar nomination, but from what we've seen up to this point, it's a pretty great performance. The issue, I think, is that he is definitely considered a lead actor performance. They probably would campaign him as a supporting, but
so he's going to be going up against It's his fast benders and
yeah. So I don't think he'll get it based on that if you're looking at it from actually the performance he gave in the film. But if they put him into supporting, he could maybe work his way in there if there's not a strong field. Okay, so now we're gonna jump into our actual opinion on this whole list of films that we've seen this year. We're gonna start so that we don't give up what some of our favorites are right away. We're gonna start with films that we just thought were decent and films that we thought were meh, middle of the road, forgettable, something we can't even really remember at this point, even if we did a review on these films. So what were some films that you thought were decent?
when it comes to what's meh and what's decent, I think decent jumps a little bit higher up than that. For me, I kind of surprised myself with a few of these because they're movies I may not even have seen if I wasn't going to review. The first thing that comes to mind, which was actually decent, was Central Intelligence, which was a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and one of my least favorite entertainers in the world, Kevin Love. Right? Kevin Love?
Hart.
Kevin Hart.
Close enough.
Kevin Hart. And that guy grew on me this summer with that and the voice performance that he did earlier. I don't know. It was stupid fun, and I was enjoying myself in the theater. Maybe it was the mood I was in. I don't know. But so it was decent. I think you really loved Swiss Army Man. I thought it could have been better, but I did think there's no way it's a bad movie. I just wanted it to be great, and it kind of fell into my decent category. And most recently, War Dogs. Almost a little better than decent, but I would say right in the time slot it was at the end of the summer, it did what it was supposed to do, and it was a decent movie.
I agree. I mean, two of those films are films that I didn't catch yet, but I'm interested to see Central Intelligence and War Dogs. For me, the two that I kind of thought were decent enough, they had positives, but they weren't really hits in my mind, or they had enough flaws that I kind of kept them on this level of just an alright film, was Legend of Tarzan, which we already talked a little bit about. I like those kind of adventure films. I had some issues with the effects in it, and some of the action. I don't even really remember what some of my
when he's
issues
swinging,
were.
it should have been so much better.
Yeah, and I don't want to say a film lives or dies by its effects. It's really the story that should matter most.
But that's one of the things when you make a Tarzan movie, right?
Yeah. So it was decent. And Sausage Party. I knew going into it I was probably going to be offended by the film, and I came out offended. But it was decent. I had enough chuckles and laughs and was entertained. So it's decent. Some films that I thought were just meh: Angry Birds and The Purge.
The Purge is what I was going to say.
And they just were forgettable, run-of-the-mill movies by the time you're done with them.
The Purge is the definition of meh this summer.
Yeah.
Worse than the two before it, banking on the star from the one before it, and just really stripped down and with none of the flair or fun of the other ones.
Yeah, definitely. Now You See Me Too was a film that I saw that I enjoyed the original, but it was way too over the top for me. And the new cast additions of Harry Potter and whoever else they threw in there didn't really do enough to make it an interesting film.
I would have gone to see it if Daniel Radcliffe was playing Harry Potter.
Expecto Patronum!
That would have been awesome.
And then two that fall under this category that I think other people were over the moon on, but for me they just fell in the meh category, is Captain America Civil War and Suicide Squad. Both of those films are ultimately forgettable to me at this point.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Captain America, because I would borderline put it in decent, right between meh and decent. A part of it is me just going, why do you get a free pass all the time? Like, do people just constantly overlook these enormous plot holes in these Marvel movies? There's so many, and it's like everyone's bashing these plot holes in the X-Men movies and blah blah blah, and look in front of you. These Marvel movies are not perfect. Yeah, they're good performances. People like them because they're full of star power, and then they're also full of tons and tons of comic book characters. You jam that many comic book characters into anything, they could have just been tap dancing on stage and people would have gone to see it. I think it's fine. It's nowhere near as good as Winter Soldier. Nowhere near. And we already talked about all that. Suicide Squad, I liked more, I think, than you did. Yeah, then I'm mad. I mean, the obvious, the problems stick out like a sore fucking thumb, but I still had fun watching it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so those are some films that just fell into the decent and meh category.
Nice.
So really quickly, let's talk about what your fourth favorite film of the summer was.
Okay, John. My fourth favorite film of the summer is The Nice Guys. Loved this movie, had such a blast watching it. Was excited to see Shane Black kind of going back into that film noir that he's really good at. Great dialogue. Ryan Gosling, to me, should be up for Best Actor this year at this moment. I don't know what kind of Oscar bait shit's coming out later, but right now that guy was outstanding and he stole that movie.
Well, I'm right there with you. Number 4 for me is The Nice Guys. For all the same reasons you said, this was actually a film I had a high anticipation for. It's one that I caught a small bit of a trailer and it was enough to just get me really excited. Knowing that Shane Black was doing this kind of buddy film and the two performers that were involved really had me excited. I know Ryan Gosling can really nail these quirky comedic roles, so I was excited, and it was everything I had hoped for and more. It's not a perfect film, and that's probably why it's only at 4 on the list. There's some really great films that did come out during the summer, but it was definitely one of the best ones I saw. One of the few films that I saw twice and really loved it both times I saw it. Okay, so moving on to some films that surprised us, disappointed us, and films that were just flat out terrible. Let's start with the worst. What were the just bad, god-awful films this summer?
I'm going to fight you on this because I think the worst movie of not just the summer, of many summers and possibly many years, is Independence Day Resurgence. It's just a complete piece of crap. There's just nothing in this movie.
I'm not putting up any fight with that.
I was kind of kidding, but there's literally nothing in this movie to enjoy. I thought at least I would enjoy seeing Jeff Goldblum play that character. I thought at least I would enjoy how stupid it was that it would make me smile and laugh and shove my popcorn in my face. But instead, I was sighing and just staring at the exit sign, waiting to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah, we were with a group and we all were staring at the exit sign. We were all looking over each other saying, is this really happening? Can we just leave and get a beer somewhere and something we'll enjoy? Yeah, I agree. It was one of the worst. I slightly put Jason Bourne below that as, for me, the worst film that I saw this summer. It was just so boring. And I've always known that the Bourne films, for me, they live and die on 2 or 3 action scenes that happen during the movie. And those usually were enough to just get my adrenaline going and be excited for what I got in those films. I was never a huge fan of them. But this one, not a single action scene was interesting for me. And so it was just a complete waste and a complete bore the whole time. There were a lot of really bad performances and really terrible dialogue.
Tommy Lee Jones, he's in a new movie coming out. He looks brilliant in it, but there was something about this movie he just didn't know he was there. I've thought about this with Bourne. He was part of an underground CIA operative service called Treadstone, right? I've always thought the word tread and stone really just sum up these movies. Treading water with story and just stone fucking characters.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
That works pretty well. Or Trudge Stone for me. It's like a trudging through the muck to get through those movies. They
or
really
shitstone.
Boring. At least with this last one. Okay, so a couple other I'll just mention that I don't think maybe were for you on the complete bad god-awful list, but for me I thought they were pretty terrible, was Warcraft and Ghostbusters. I kind of hated both of those films.
You have all the right in the world, and that's a very legitimate argument, and the more and more I think about Warcraft, it deserves to be on there.
So to continue with bad movies but not films that we thought were just completely god-awful wastes of time, but films we probably had high anticipation for or some kind of slight interest, but didn't live up to what we were expecting. So films that you thought were a disappointment this summer.
Well, I wouldn't really call Lights Out a disappointment. If you see the 2.5-minute YouTube short film, it's fucking terrifying. And it's raw, and it's made by the same director. They gave him, James Wan saw this YouTube clip, gave him $5 million to make this movie, and for the most part, I guess in the studio's eyes, he vastly succeeded expectations. But I'm disappointed because it didn't live up to that 2.5 minutes of terror that sticks in your head long after you see it. It's an okay movie with a couple intense scenes and some visually interesting camera work that I liked, and you can tell it's a young guy trying to throw out as much as he can in this movie so he can get other jobs. But it just wasn't, like I said, I didn't write a review about it. It wasn't scary. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of whatever. And in my opinion, that failed.
Yeah, well, all of the films that I talk about for bad movies fall on my disappointment list because they were films that I had hoped, whether because they're sequels to films that we've seen in the past, or like Warcraft, it's the chance to start a new fantasy series. The director was somebody I really respected from some of their previous films. So for all those reasons, all of those same films, Warcraft, Independence Day, Jason Bourne, and Ghostbusters, all fall on my disappointment list.
Yeah, I guess I put Sausage Party in there as a slight disappointment because again, we all know how Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen write. They're crass and they're a little over the top, but I knew the story behind them getting this developed, and it sounded like something really, really special. And then I did watch a few trailers for it, and I was like, this is gonna be great. And they kept saying, "Oh, it has the heart of a Pixar movie, but it's an R-rated movie," and it just didn't have the heart. Like, it was funny, but it didn't have the heart, and it didn't have the story, and they went the darker, meaner spirited route than they could have done just as funny with, it's an adult animated film, but it could have been more Lego movie-ish.
So you've never heard of The Prophecy?
No.
Or The Special?
No,
You're a liar, motherfucker.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of one that still found a way to have heart, yet still be a little bit edgy, not necessarily crass the way that Sausage Party is, but I feel like the writers of Sausage Party really wanted it for their usual audience, which is more of a teen,
and that's fine,
vulgar, raunchy kind of audience.
Pot smoking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the last two I'll mention as disappointments. We've already gone over them as films that I felt were meh to some degree, and that's why they are disappointments for me, because they're some of the biggest films of the summer with great directors involved and cast that we can respect. It's two of the biggest comic book movies of the summer, Captain America and Suicide Squad. Again, they fall under disappointment. I think we mentioned at the very beginning of the review, my most anticipated film of the summer was Suicide Squad, and it just did not turn out very well in my opinion. It's barely even a movie. It felt so much like a music video most of the time that's why I'm labeling it as a huge disappointment. It was my most anticipated and therefore my most disappointment, my biggest disappointment for the summer.
But that's funny that you mentioned Suicide Squad because as we were talking about trends earlier and how marketing can affect things so easily and reviews, Suicide Squad did turn out to be pretty review proof, and to a certain extent maybe it could have even passed Captain America Civil War if word of mouth was that it was as good as the trailer suggested it was. That movie fell into the trap that 2009's Terminator Salvation did. It was an absolute brilliant trailer. You probably never saw it because you don't watch trailers. No, I think it was the teaser one because it had this like really somber, quiet Nine Inch Nails song playing through it, and it was just some beautiful shots of like the desolate like desert and a few of the shots of Christian Bale. And I remember the audience in the theater going like, "Holy shit, the Christian Bale's John Connor, that's insane!" And the trailer was done so well, and well, we all know how the movie turned out, but Suicide Squad kind of fell into that. Like, it was such a good trailer, and the studio was like, fuck, this movie's not nearly as good as the trailer's suggesting, so I guess we should put the movie back in the studio and make it more like the trailer. So let's throw an Eminem song in the first 5 minutes of it, and then we'll follow it up with a Beastie Boys song. Before
we start going into the positive and really talking about films that surprised us or some of our favorites of the summer, let me hear what your third favorite film of the summer was.
Okay, and this one was, I was always expecting it to end up somewhere in here. I'm happy that it did. Ended up pretty much where I wanted it to, and that would be Star Trek Beyond. Right now, it's my second favorite Star Trek film of the newly rebooted franchise. Longevity and repeat viewing will tell me if it actually surpasses the first one, but I think it's a fantastic movie. I think the director change was actually a good thing, even though Abrams was fantastic starting it back up again. But I loved this movie. It was my favorite giant, big budget action movie of the summer.
Nice. Yes, I really enjoyed Star Trek as well. For my third favorite film of the summer, it's one that you picked, I think, is your fifth favorite film of the summer, Conjuring 2. I thought it was excellent. I was actually scared in this film, which is hard to do with horror films these days. I think James Wan is kind of a genius right now with what he's able to do in the horror genre. I really want to see this continue as a series, not just a third film, a fourth, a fifth, whatever. Keep it going, because I feel like there are a ton of ghost stories to be told out there that actually connect to these two main characters. Sure, they're going to embellish the real story a lot as they continue. I feel like the way this series is set up right now, as they're continuing in time too, it's going to be kind of like what a lot of these series are trying to do, like the X-Men series and other series have tried to make these films where you see the timeline moving into different eras. So we'll get an 80s version, a 90s version, or something like that. I think that could be kind of an interesting way to continue that series. I hope that they are all on board to keep making more Conjuring movies, because I loved it, and I think a third film that's as good as the first two could really cement it as one of the best horror series to ever actually, put out decent continuation of films and get to 3 films that you really still love. Great. All right. Well, let's move on to some positive films now, films that we actually enjoyed. We're going to start with some surprises of the summer. Some of these films might also fall on our list of what we thought were our favorites, but still, let's talk about what really surprised you this summer.
Okay. The one that stood out for me the absolute most is The Shallows. Like I said, small budget, ended up doing really well. The surprises of that movie was Blake Lively's performance, which had to carry the movie. Very short movie, knew exactly how long it should be, never felt over long, didn't feel too short. And it was John Collette-Serra who directed it, who's done a lot of, for some reason he works with Liam Neeson a lot, but he's done some really good movies with a brilliant cinematographer that he works with. And this movie looks gorgeous, from all the shots to how it's lit, because it's all sunlight, it's all in one location. The CGI team that put together the shark should be up for an Oscar this year. They had like no money to do it. That thing looks real, 100% real. I talk about it in my review, so I won't go too much into it. But that's the best CGI shark this side of Deep Blue Sea you'll ever see.
Nice. For me, probably the biggest surprise of the summer, like something that I actually knew a little bit about, that I came out very surprised, was The Secret Life of Pets. I knew the studio behind it and was actually kind of dreading having to sit through another one of their films. So I was amazed at how much of a smile I had while watching this movie, and just came out really energized and really entertained by this film.
Yeah, I liked it too. And I'd never seen any of the Talking Twinkie movies, so they looked terrible to me.
Again, you're very lucky. So some other films I think fall under surprises for us. Just this last weekend, Don't Breathe was definitely a great surprise.
Though I expected it to be good, but...
True, we knew the director was somebody that we were interested in their next film, but I think that the release date, coming out at the end of August, is always a dumping ground for terrible movies, so it could have easily just been some forgettable piece of junk, but this one's going to be a hit, and it was a really good movie.
Watch our review for it, we loved it, but yeah, I guess you're right, that is a surprise, because you didn't really know much about it. They kept putting out, I kept seeing posters in the theater with a woman like holding her hands over her face, and that was, I just knew it was a horror movie.
Yeah. Another one that surprised me at how entertained I was Swiss Army Man. It was just such a strange, quirky film. I sat there grinning the whole time. It's a weird movie. It has its negatives, but it was, for the most part, it was a positive experience for me. I enjoyed it.
I don't think that movie was... I don't like to talk about it in a negative way. I can see the beauty of it, and I do appreciate it, and I really appreciate the filmmaking and the balls that they had to make that kind of movie. I think the excessiveness after a while kind of got to me, and I was having trouble digesting what we're supposed to be paying attention to as what the actual story of the movie is. Because at first it's like, okay, I get it. I get what he's trying to do with this dead body, and then it shifts into so many gears, and it becomes he's playing dress up for the second act of the movie. I kind of got lost, but I was paying total attention. I was by myself. I think that's where I kind of was like, it had so much. It was starting out so great, and then I just kind of fell out of it a little bit. Yeah. But I can see how great it was made and stuff.
And I totally agree. I think in the review that I did for it, I do mention how it kind of falls apart and has third act problems. So later in the film, it's not as strong as the setup. But
if you want to see, one of the things I loved about your review is that you said if you want to see something like mind-bogglingly different, I don't know if those were your exact words, that is the best way to describe it. You don't need to say anything, but you'll never see a movie like this again.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move on to what we think our second favorite film of the summer was. What was your second favorite film?
Okay, so my second favorite film of the summer is a recent release, and it's called Hell or High Water, and it's one of the best movies of the year. Definitely getting the praise that it deserves. I'm happy to see it finally open up wide and get some more attention, make a little bit more money. This movie's fantastic. Everything about it. It's a heartbreaking movie. It's funny as hell. It's got the best performance from Chris Pine that you've seen so far. It has Jeff Bridges being the awesomeness that we know him to be. Ben Foster as well. I love this movie. It has next to no flaws. I've now seen this one twice, and I can honestly say the second time was just as enjoyable with already knowing what is going to happen. Just as enjoyable sitting along for that ride because this movie is a character study, and I didn't figure that out until the second time I saw it. That it really, really is. You catch a couple things the second time that you didn't catch the first time. Facial expressions, one or two lines of dialogue you missed. This movie is a total character study, but don't let that discourage you as it's being boring, because there's not a boring frame in this movie.
For me, my second favorite film of the summer is Hunt for the Wilder People. That movie is just, it's another unique film that not many people have heard about it unless you're in New Zealand or Australia, apparently. It's a huge hit there, I guess, but this film was just hilarious right from the get-go. It had us just cracking up, but it also has some really great moments of drama and some just really touching moments in the film. Actually, I think one of the most emotional film-going experiences of the summer for me. It has highs and lows all throughout the film, but the highs in the comedy area are just so memorable, so great. It's a film I really wanted to see a second time, but it didn't last in the theater long enough because it's a small independent film. Much like the first film by this director that I had seen, What We Do in the Shadows. It's another film that any chance I get to recommend it to somebody or tell them about this little film you've never heard of, you've got to see it. And almost every time someone takes that advice, they come back to me with, "Thank you, you told me I saw it. It is so hilarious. I'm going to love that film till the day I die."
Taika Waititi.
Yes, that is
In
the
you we
director.
trust.
So now we're going to talk about what some of our overall favorite films of the summer were, but we're going to talk about it in terms of what was your favorite big budget type films, big spectacle films, films with big stars, big attempts at comedy, high concept, whatever the big marketed films of the summer, not the small independent ones.
Well, obviously for me, and I don't know if you really want to call it big stars. I think they're up-and-coming stars. I think Star Trek Beyond has a lot of up-and-coming stars. X-Men Apocalypse. Again, we both really enjoyed it. Didn't do as well as hopeful. To me, it had everything. It was an X-Men movie. I don't really get the criticism, except for maybe they didn't like the kind of villain of the week thing, which we talked about in our review. X-Men always really strayed from. It was never like a clear-cut villain. It was more ideology-based. Maybe that was the problem with this one, but for me, it had locations, absolutely jaw-dropping special effects, the Quicksilver scene again. A lot of up-and-coming stars. Fassbender is a movie star. Jennifer Lawrence, huge movie star, didn't really give two shits about being in this movie, so it's hard to count her. This movie, I love this movie. It was really colorful. It was Bryan Singer saying this universe is still alive and open, and we're not part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but we have our own universe and our own stories to tell. To me, it just knocked it out of the park. I love this movie. I saw this movie twice, too.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Those were my two favorite as well that fit that description. X-Men Apocalypse and Star Trek, my two favorite of the kind of action, adventure type films of the summer. Another one that I kind of classify as an action film that it's, even though it's a smaller budgeted film, I still think it kind of fits the description of a large film for the summer. It's a sequel to a already bona fide hit, which was The Conjuring 2.
Agreed.
We both really loved it. It was on both of our top 5 lists at this point. Two others that I could mention that I think everybody knew they were going to make pretty good money, but I think they turned out to be very entertaining films would be Finding Dory and The Secret Life of Pets. Those are big films for the summer, and probably the two biggest moneymakers when you're actually talking about films that are comedies. Finding Dory and Secret Life of Pets were bona fide hits, very funny films, very well made and very entertaining. So I think those really were excellent films on the big films of the summer list. Maybe the last one that we would both consider, it fits right in the middle of a big film or small film, is The Nice Guys. We obviously both loved it. It has big stars. It has a director that people kind of know to some degree, but it really played like a small film. No one saw it, and that was such a shame. Okay, and so for smaller films, more independent-minded films, only played in a few theaters possibly, what were some of your favorites there?
Well, we've talked about most of them. Most recently, The Shallows for me, very small budget. A decent amount of theaters it opened up in, but nothing spectacular. You know, it didn't open up to mind-boggling numbers. But again, I thought it was great. Don't Breathe, smaller movie, no big stars. When Stephen Lang is your biggest draw, that's not a big budget movie. Then you have Hell or High Water, obviously. Hunt for the Wilder People is a foreign film, so I don't know the business it's doing in the country that it originally opened up in. So maybe it is doing spectacular. It might be the biggest movie ever made there. So yeah, those ones for me stand out.
And I'm right there with you. I didn't see The Shallows, but all the other ones that you mentioned are the ones that I consider to be great small independent films that really just entertain. I'll throw in there Florence Foster Jenkins, another film that obviously it's got big names involved in that film. I even think the director has his own pedigree that could get some people to come out and check it out.
British people.
But during the summer, that film's not a draw. It actually came out like when they always try to target these certain release dates, there usually is like a female-driven drama that comes out at the beginning of August. They've been doing it for years. Things like The Help came out around that time.
Wow, you're right.
Eat, Pray, Love, or whatever the hell that was with Julia Roberts. There was one Hope Springs, which was another Meryl Streep. They all came out on that first weekend or second weekend.
What about Ricky and the Flash?
Same last summer, same weekend. They target these weekends, you know. But this one was a great fit for that kind of grandma movie or whatever that came out in the summer. I feel like these small films were the better films of the summer. It was not really the big films we expected. Some of these films like Suicide Squad and Civil War and Independence Day were kind of major disappointments for me. So let's wrap it up with your favorite film of the summer.
Okay, so my number one pick of the summer of 2016 is Hunt for the Wilder People. Taika Waititi is becoming one of my favorite directors to look for. Again, he's one of those guys you have to seek out because his stuff is made in a different country than ours. Except for he's doing Ragnarok, this movie got me so excited to see that because they literally have nothing to do with each other. And then they came out and they said that Ragnarok is going to be like a buddy road movie with like the Hulk and Thor. And I'm like, oh shit, how amazing would that be after seeing how awesome this movie is? Hunt for the Wilder People just hit me. And I got to thank you for that too, because you got me to go see this movie. I did not know what it was. I'm not going to lie. When I found out who was directing it after you told me about it, I wanted to go see it. And I'm super glad that I did, because as of right now, it's my favorite film of the year, not just of the summer. It's just a beautiful movie that made me feel happy. But there's something about this movie that I was watching this really amazing film with amazing performances that made me feel good, but I also noticed how wonderful the filmmaking was, how well it was shot, especially how well it was paced. Some of the editing techniques really stand out as stuff that you just don't see happen that often anymore. You see them in these movies that people are calling classics now, these modern day classics from like the 90s all the way to now, like trying new things. And the fact that here in the States, it's not going to get recognition. It's not going to be at the Oscars. Maybe it'll be like Best Foreign Film. That would be awesome. But who knows? I don't know if it's really that type of movie. It definitely wasn't trying to be that movie. It was just trying to be what it was. The director has heart and soul, and like he took, I guess it was a book before, he took that and made it its own because it's got his stamp of humor and his stamp of his vision of the world on it. And it's a Sam Neill performance that you really need to see if you love Sam Neill. And it's got all these amazing New Zealand actors in it that I had never seen before. And then of course a couple of regular Waititi guys that come in and are awesome just like they are in everything else. I love this movie. It's definitely my favorite movie of the year so far.
Awesome, man. I mean, I agree with you on every point you just made. I wish I had made a bunch of those points when I was talking about what was my second favorite film, Hunt for the Wilder People. I loved it just as much as you. But I believe you picked for your second favorite Hell or High Water, and I'm going with that as my favorite of the summer and my favorite of the year at this point. Just really, you got to listen to our review for both of these films that we picked as our top and second favorite films of the year, because we want to get everybody to see these little films And that's what we're kind of trying to point out is our two favorite films of the summer are the two films that no one's heard of, no one's going to see, these tiny micro-budget little films. They are so excellent. They're both character-driven films that just work on a level that all of these big spectacle films don't even attempt to work on. Hell or High Water, what I love so much about it is it encompasses everything that I want at the movies. It was a very tense film, exciting when it needs to be, hilarious comedy in this film, and touching moments as well. What an excellent cast this film had, some of the best performances by some of these actors. They finally get their moment to shine, I think, and it was just such a great experience seeing this film. I can't wait to see it again. I hope it lasts in the theater long enough for me to get around to seeing it again. I want to take people to see this. I've got plans to take 2 or 3 people that have an interest in seeing this. So maybe by the time this is out of the theaters, I'll have seen it 3 times or so. And that would not be a problem for me because I just thought this was excellent. Great filmmaking all around, great performances all around, great music, great cinematography. I mean, really just had every filmmaking aspect. They checked the box 100%. It was great.
Excellent choice, man.
Yeah.
You and I were both like right there with those top 2.
Yes, I agree. I think we both love them just as much. Just there's little aspects that makes you maybe like Hunt for the Wilder People a little bit more than I did, and I like Hell or High Water a little bit more than you did. But really, they're right on the same level. They're the 2 best films of the year. We totally agree with that.
A lot of the times, I don't let emotion breach my perspective on a movie. For the most part, I usually don't. I'll just look at technicals and then I'll look at script and things like that. They were both so well made, and there was just something with Wilder People that just gave me this, I don't know what it was. It's hard to describe. All right, everybody, that was Cinema Gulp's Summer of 2016 wrap-up. We hope you guys got a little bit out of this. Go see some of these movies we're talking about. Don't see some of them.
A lot of, definitely some good films, but a lot of disappointments this summer. Hope for a better fall and winter full of movies.
But thank you for your time and your ears. We've just now crossed like our 5 month of doing this on Cinema Gulp, and we appreciate each and every person that we have. And we look forward to so many more reviews with you guys, and look forward to our next series, which is coming up this coming week, which is Chasers.
Very excited for that. That's going to expand our list of films that we can really see from, which is all of history. It's going to be exciting. Thanks a lot for listening. This has been John for Cinema Gulp.
And this has been We Drink Your Cinema.
I drink it up!
Summer feeling, when the playground that just was all dirt comes haunted, and someone who called you a flirt comes taunted. It's not that these things alone were appealing. What I'm now revealing is a certain feeling. That summer feeling is gonna haunt you the rest of your life. What time?